This podcast is Challenging Opinions and is presented by William Campbell.
Thank you for downloading the Challenging Opinions podcast for June 3rd, 2019. Cybersecurity, hacking, electronic privacy, they're all hot topics at the moment. Let's have a hot discussion with someone who actually knows what he's talking about.
Challenging Opinions is the podcast where ideas are tested. Whether you are left or right, conservative or progressive, devout or skeptic. What matters is the strength of your argument, not the strength of your voice.
In a few minutes, we'll have this.
Right, it's end-to-end encrypted. No. Nobody
but
in the
it could
middle
be.
can eavesdrop.
But they don't need to be in the middle. They don't need to be in the middle because, and I looked at this, and a lot of the security features in WhatsApp are copied.
No, it is not the case that WhatsApp client is taking a copy of the message and sending it to Facebook. No.
That's coming up shortly. But first, I want to thank all of my donors on Patreon. I really appreciate them all. In case you don't know, Patreon is basically a system that allows people to donate $1 or $2 per podcast or per month. And that helps me to devote more time to research and to finding interesting guests. If you think that you could do the same as them and donate a little bit, there's details on the website and at the end of the show. A couple of quite similar stories caught my eye in the past while. The first was about the German MP called Markus Frohnmayer. He was elected to the Bundestag, the German parliament, for the far-right AfD party in 2017. A consortium of journalists from the BBC, German news magazine Der Spiegel and TV station ZDF, and the Italian La Repubblica newspaper got a leaked email from Petr Permiak, a former Russian spy who is also a former member of the Russian parliament. The email, which Permiak confirmed is real, but he says he didn't draft, was sent a couple of months before Frohnmayer was elected. It contains a document assessing the state of public opinion in Germany and analysing how to influence it in favour of Russia. The whole document is in Russian. It also refers to Markus Frohnmayer. Frohnmayer, for a bit of background, is quite young. He's only 28 now. He was 26 when he was elected to Parliament. He has very frequently spoken against the EU sanctions on Russia imposed after the invasion of areas of Ukraine. He's also made trips to Crimea, the Ukrainian territory illegally annexed by Russia in 2014, and to areas of eastern Ukraine controlled by pro-Russian separatists and Russian special forces. The leaked document says that Frohnmayer is, quote, our own absolutely controlled politician. And it goes on to predict, rightly as it turned out, that he had a good chance of getting elected, and discusses how Russian money could be used to get him elected. The second story is about Austria's FPO party. They're one of the most successful far-right parties in Europe. They are in coalition government with that country's Conservative Party, or they were until a secretly recorded video of Heinz-Christian Strache, the party's leader, was published. It was made on the Mediterranean party island of Ibiza, and it shows Strache with a woman who said she was the niece of a Russian billionaire. They discussed a deal where his party would arrange for her to take ownership of an Austrian newspaper. The newspaper would be switched to supporting his party. Her billionaire uncle would get large government contracts and pay Strache big bribes. The scandal has led the Austrian government to fall apart, and it remains to be seen what the coming election will throw up. The third story is about Nigel Farage, the former leader of the British UKIP party. it emerged that he was paid hundreds of thousands of pounds, well over $500,000 a year, by a British businessman. A couple of things about this. Farage said that his friend was helping him out because he was broke. This is clearly a lie. At the time, Farage was a member of the European Parliament with a salary of about $10,000 a month, along with more than $30,000 a month in media earnings. That makes more than $500,000 in earnings a year, so he was hardly broke. But the real issue here is that Aaron Banks, the businessman, so-called, who was giving him the money, it's not entirely clear that he is a businessman at all. Investigations into his wealth seem to lead back to, guess where? Russia. In a different age, any one of these stories would have led directly to the immediate and permanent exile of their subjects from politics, and they would be lucky to stay out of jail. And, of course, they and their parties would most likely suffer permanent damage. But not in 2019. Nigel Farage's new party, the Brexit Party, has just had a stunning success, winning the European Parliament elections in Britain. All the more impressive for a party that's only a month old. I'll talk about that more at the top of next week's podcast, but what I want to remark on here is how gleefully these stories were reported in left-wing newspapers, on left-wing social media. Their political opponents were sharing it like crazy. Now, it's true that the FPO in Austria suffered a small loss of votes in the European Parliament elections. The AfD went up in Germany, but they didn't do as well as they did in recent national elections. But these are minor swings, and, as I said, Nigel Farage's Brexit Party had a storming success. The bottom line is that their supporters don't care about these stories. It doesn't matter how stark they are. Documents confirmed as genuine, where the Kremlin says a member of parliament is a controlled agent. Video of a politician arranging corrupt contracts in return for undermining the media and taking large bribes. A party leader taking massive, probably illegal payments from a questionable businessman. Their supporters just don't care. That's a lesson for the people who oppose them. The lesson is that no matter how much you enjoy those stories, how much you like sharing these stories with everyone who agrees with you, how it confirms everything you ever thought about these people, it doesn't convince anyone. The people who listen agree with you already. And the people who don't agree with you, they don't listen. Some people, support these politicians, and they do so for a reason. And it's not connected with how corrupt they are or aren't. A decade ago, we might have all thought that liberal democracy is where the whole world was converging. Just that some places were getting there faster than others. Now that's not so sure. Progress, if you call it that, can also regress. People who believe in democratic values have to learn how to win people over, not just wait for them to come round.
Do you agree? Do you disagree? If you want your point of view heard, email podcast@challengingopinions.com and say what you think.
On the line now, I have Bruce Schneier. He's a public interest technologist. He's been writing about security issues for more than 20 years. He's a special advisor to IBM Security. He's a fellow and lecturer at Harvard's Kennedy School, and he's a board member of the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Bruce, thank you for coming on. One thing that I wanted to talk about...
I want to say before you start that I speak for none of those organizations. I am speaking for me.
And that's absolutely understood, but it tells us where you're coming from.
Indeed, and not where I'm going, though.
That's true. That's also true. What I wanted to start by asking you is about what's called a backdoor. And you and I are using Skype now. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with apps like WhatsApp, and there's many other communication apps on phones. Some are more popular in different countries. And what is a backdoor in those apps?
So you're asking for not a backdoors in general, but backdoors like communication apps. That's a specific instance of a backdoor. Let's just start with general. A backdoor is another means of access, right? That's what a backdoor is. You got a front door, you have a back door. It's another way to get in. In security, we would tend to refer to it as a surreptitious way to get in. So it's not just another means of access, right? You have a key for your front door, a key for your back door, you can choose, but it is a way in that you might not know about, that might be used against your interest, that is designed into the system by someone who is not working for you. We normally think of backdoors used by criminals. They will, if they break into a system, one of the things they want to do is add a backdoor. They can get in again at some later time. We talk about backdoors put in by governments, either because they want to spy on you for political purposes, they want to spy on you for law enforcement, they want to spy on you because spying is what they do. So that's in general what a backdoor is. So now in a communication system, right, a backdoor is another way into the communications. So we are using Skype, and you and I can listen to this conversation because we're either end. If some third party can surreptitiously listen in on our conversation, whether it's a criminal or a government or a police or a secret police or a spy agency, they're going to be using a backdoor. Now, if we have a secure system, it's something that we believe is secure, WhatsApp is end-to-end encrypted, which means no one in the middle can eavesdrop. It's designed that way. Right now, lots of governments, for all sorts of reasons, would like there to be backdoors into Skype. Right? That will, of course, break the security and allow someone else to eavesdrop on what the participants believe is a secure conversation.
So with WhatsApp, when you said end-to-end security, do I understand that correctly? That to say, when I'm sending a message, say maybe a shopping list to my partner, and she gets it, it is encrypted before it leaves my phone, and it is only decrypted after it arrives at her phone. Is that right?
So that's correct. And that's the way that works. And you can contrast that with something like Gmail. Now, when you go onto Gmail, you are using SSL encryption. You are encrypted from your computer or phone to Google servers, but that mail is unencrypted on Google servers because they do work with it, right? They check for spam, they sort it, they put it in a pretty email reader. So that is not end-to-end encrypted, right? The message is encrypted between my computer and Gmail servers. Then it's unencrypted. It might be encrypted again when it goes to, I'm going to make this up, Apple's network, where it's unencrypted and Apple has access to it. And then it's encrypted again when it goes from Apple servers to the recipient's Apple mail reader.
Okay.
Right? So that is not end-to-end encrypted, and that's different than something like WhatsApp, which is end-to-end encrypted.
Okay. So one question that I have, and because when I start sending a message in WhatsApp, it pops up and it says the messages between you and this other person are now encrypted. Why should I believe them?
You should believe them because you trust them. That's the only reason we have. Now, we know how the protocol works. We can read papers. You might not be able to, but, I can. But in the end, I am not reviewing their code. I have to take their word that they are implementing what they say they are properly. This is no different than anything else in computers anywhere ever. Right?
But they could fib.
Of course, they could, right? Just like right, Facebook can lie to you when they tell you what they're doing with your data, and often do. Right, just like the people designing your computer or the chips or the apps or anything could either lie or make a mistake and not give you the security properties you intend. In this highly complex technical world, we are forced to trust those of us, those who provide tech services. Now, I flew on an airplane a couple of days ago, and I trusted Delta Airlines that they maintain the brains properly. I didn't check, and I actually A, don't know how to check, and B, wouldn't be allowed to check. right? I am trusting.
Of course, yes, there's an element of trust there. But aside from that, we've heard a lot of governments around the world say, hang on a second, that encryption is causing us a problem because before, in the days of a dial-up telephone, if we knew of some bad guys out there, we would tap their telephones and we'd be able to hear what they're saying. So we want to just get back to the same situation and be able to tap people's messages in WhatsApp or any of these other messaging apps. Do you have any sympathy with that position?
I mean, I have sympathy for it, but kind of too bad. In a sense, they're cherry picking, right? Back in the era of telephones, a lot of conversations happened face to face. And, once those conversations happened, they were gone forever. And you and I could walk out into an empty field, look around, see nobody, and have a level of privacy that is forever lost today to technology. And right now, most of our conversations happen over email, and there are records that go back in time. So that's brand new. It's not that they want to eavesdrop on existing conversations. There are lots of ways to do that. They want to go back in time, and that's new. And there are lots of ways to get forensic data. Right? I mean, your phone is a GPS. Right? Your phone is a surveillance device. Sits in your pocket 24/7. Knows where you are at all times. Knows when you wake up, when you go to sleep. Everyone has one. Knows who you sleep with. I look at law enforcement and their ability to collect forensic data is light years ahead of what it was in those years of analog telephones, where if they were lucky, they were able to catch a conversation, right? If I use a payphone, suddenly you can't collect it anymore. And so I don't have sympathy for we need to make systems much less secure because we want to eavesdrop. I mean, the problem with what the FBI is saying is that phone they want to add a backdoor to is carried by every legislature in our countries, every world leader, every CEO, every nuclear power plant operator. The security risks of putting backdoors in our communication systems, in our devices, is so great that I really would like to solve a few crimes easier because I'm lazy. It's just simply a bad justification.
Then tell me, because we've seen various accusations, particularly around Facebook, and I note that WhatsApp is actually owned by Facebook, and I just want to play for you one very short little clip from when Mark Zuckerberg went before the Senate, and he was asked a question by Senator Dick Durbin, and I just want you to listen to this quick exchange.
If I'm emailing within WhatsApp, does that ever inform your advertisers?
No, we don't see any of the content in WhatsApp. It's fully encrypted.
Right, but is there some algorithm that spits out some information to your ad platform, and then let's say I'm emailing about Black Panther within WhatsApp? Do I get a Black Panther banner ad?
Senator, Facebook systems do not see the content of messages being transferred over WhatsApp.
Yeah, I know, but that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking about whether these systems talk to each other without a human being touching it.
Senator, I think the answer to your specific question is if you message someone about Black Panther on WhatsApp, it would not inform any ads.
Okay. I want to follow up on Senator.
First of all, I know you're way more experienced, Bruce, with the electronics and the security of this. I might be maybe a little bit more experienced with questioning people who I don't fully trust. Do you detect any slipperiness in that answer from Mark Zuckerberg?
No, oddly, probably the only answer he gave in that hearing that wasn't slippery. No.
Really?
Yeah, right. They don't have access to content. Now, they have access to the metadata. And so they'll know if that senator, is texting about Black Panther to, I don't know, let's say his friend, he'll know that a message went by, right? That's called traffic analysis. And that is certainly a way that governments of all stripes, law enforcement, secret police, everybody gets access to sort of who your social network is. But the content is no. The content is end-to-end encrypted. And you can tell it's kind of a dumb question because he kept asking the question after Zuckerberg answered it, like Zuckerberg was being evasive. In fact, Zuckerberg was being very, very clear. And the senator actually didn't understand the answer.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting because I have a totally different take on that, because I think that he didn't answer the question clearly, because he at least twice before he gave a straighter answer, Zuckerberg was asked, could this inform the advertising? And he answered a different question. He said, we don't see it. Now, I think that
but
technically,
he answered the right question. That's right. I think he was stopping and saying, well, that's a stupid question. What's he really asking me? Right? It's end-to-end encrypted. No. Nobody in the middle can eavesdrop.
But they don't need to be in the middle. They don't need to be in the middle because, and I looked at this, and a lot of the security features in WhatsApp are copied.
No, it is not the case that WhatsApp client is taking a copy of the message and sending it to Facebook. No.
I accept that that's almost certainly true. I think you're almost certainly correct on that.
However, it was a fine answer.
Oh, okay. Let me put forward a hypothesis then, and you with much greater knowledge on this can tell me if I'm wrong, how I'm wrong. First of all, I've looked at the size of Telegram, which is a different communications app, which is very highly secure. Its USP is its security. And WhatsApp is about 3 times larger. Just the file size, the actual app is taking space on your phone, takes up way more space. It is possible that there could be end-to-end encryption, but that on your phone, WhatsApp looks out for keywords or other particular information and assigns you to ad groups.
Okay,
without sending the.
Please do not say this.
Okay,
in public.
Go ahead. Tell me why that's wrong.
People are using WhatsApp, and they're secure because of it.
Mm-hmm.
You start spreading that crazy rumor, and people will stop using it, and people will be harmed. No, that is not the case.
I ask because I've had experiences where within seconds of getting a WhatsApp message for something very, very obscure that is not in my interest, just got a message from someone else for a particular reason, I started getting ads that were intimately associated with that.
I cannot convince the paranoid that this is not true.
You believe it's not true?
I cannot convince the paranoid. I know that. I have tried. I don't even bother anymore.
Oh, okay,
it is not true. It is best for the world if you do not spread this rumor. It really is. And actually, I wouldn't use Telegram. The 3 messaging apps that are end-to-end encrypted are Signal, WhatsApp, and Telegram. Signal, I think, is your best choice.
Mm-hmm.
If having Signal on your phone is itself incriminating, if you are in a country where having Signal on your phone will get yourself arrested, and there are such countries, you should use WhatsApp. Okay. That is my recommendation for end-to-end security.
And just to reassure me, you think that it's very implausible that there's any analysis done within the WhatsApp application on my phone before the message is sent?
There is not.
Okay. Well, that's good to be reassured about that. And I want to
I don't know if I convinced you, or your listeners, but it is true.
Okay. And I want to broaden that out then a bit. And there is a company called Huawei. Now, the ownership of Huawei is not entirely clear, but it's clearly a Chinese company. And it is, I think, almost certainly, although the structure is not very clear, it's almost certainly true that Huawei is owned either, perhaps not by the Chinese Communist Party, but by interests sympathetic to the Chinese Communist Party. And
my guess is that doesn't matter, that in China, in order to do business, you have to do what the Chinese Communist Party
I accept
wants.
That.
So I think ownership is largely irrelevant. Right. The fact that you are in Chinese territory operating as a business means that you are beholden to what the government wants you to do.
Especially a company of that size. It's a huge and hugely
competent. That's
competent.
how you survive in China.
Yes, you actually preempted my next point. That's not necessarily suspicious because they couldn't really exist in China without having at least some level of allegiance to the Communist Party. And there's been controversy recently in many countries around the world, with the United States in particular putting pressure on other Western governments, Australia and the UK notably, not to use Huawei equipment in their 5G rollout. So 5G is the 5th generation. It's just coming on the market now of very fast, very high volume internet mobile data. So it's going to be the next big thing on the next device that you have. And the United States has attempted to block it from being used, Huawei equipment from being used for this within the US, and they've attempted to persuade other Western countries to do the same. It seems like they have failed, particularly with the UK, and the UK has announced that they will allow Huawei to supply some of the equipment, but not the most sensitive equipment. So they could perhaps provide the antennas, but not the servers that plug into the antennas.
No, sadly, they got to provide the servers as well.
Oh, okay. Well, tell me, first of all, do you think that the US government is being excessively paranoid in this?
So, probably not. I mean, this gets us back to backdoors.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is Huawei providing critical networking equipment into the 5G network. And the worry is that at the behest of the government, the company has added backdoors into its servers. That is a perfectly reasonable fear. That it would surprise me if, in fact, the Chinese government didn't.
Yeah, they'd be crazy not to do that.
Right, they'd be crazy not to. I mean, certainly when the U.S. sends servers abroad, we will put in backdoors sometime. There's a very famous document from Edward Snowden that shows NSA employees putting a backdoor into a Cisco server destined for the Syrian telephone company. Right? We do this. China is going to do this too. So that's the fear. The problem really is that because the U.S. was distracted, you can say because AT&T was too busy suing Qualcomm to notice 5G, that there's not a lot of alternative to Chinese-made 5G networking equipment. There's Ericsson, which just sort of makes some stuff, and it's not, China now has this market, and it is very hard to not use Chinese equipment, especially now when you need it now. Can you give listeners, Bruce,
can you give listeners just an overview of that? Because we used to think of China as essentially getting an email of the circuit board diagrams and being told what to make, and you have some really not very well educated and not very well interested Chinese people doing screwdriver jobs in low-paid factories in China, doing exactly what American engineers and designers told them to do. That's not the case anymore, is it?
It's not. No. China has spent a lot of money, and here again, you're seeing the government and industry working together in a way that doesn't happen in Western countries to become the world leader in networking equipment and other technologies as well. And it is through their own internal research. It is through industrial espionage. It is through copying Western products and then selling them cheaper and then developing them. And they are now the world power in this equipment. So saying no is hard. But yes, there are risks. Now, in the UK is resisting, I think primarily because a decade ago, British Telecom heavily invested in Huawei equipment, and they don't want to throw it out. So they've successfully lobbied their government to say it's okay. And the government's saying, well, we won't use them in military networks, but we'll use them in civilian networks. It's all mixed now. So this is actually ongoing. There's no easy solution because there's no saying, we'll just go buy from this American company instead. We don't have an instead. So how this works out, we'll have to see. Our U.S. government policy doesn't allow us to subsidize U.S. companies in the same way that you can do it in China or even in Europe. So we're sort of watching this evolve. But the fear is backdoors, and it is not an unreasonable fear.
Okay. And just, again, from an electronics point of view, would it be possible for me to set up, let's say, the network for, let's say I'm setting up a firm, an office with 100 people in it, and I need to give them all computers of some type. I need to network those computers. I need to get a router to get those computers onto the internet and servers so that they can all share email and share files and so forth. Would it actually be possible to build that relatively simple network without using any equipment that was not made in China and could not be guaranteed not to have backdoors available to the Chinese military in them?
You know, you ask a good question. I don't know the answer. My guess is probably not, because you're right. I mean, you know, even you think about a Cisco router. It's not made in the U.S. You think of an iPhone. That's not made in the U.S. Its chips aren't made in the U.S. Its programmers carry 100 different passports. That you're right. That focusing on the country in which the company who sells the product is located is just one part of a very complex supply chain security problem. If you remember last year, the debate was about Kaspersky. And should we trust a Russian-made antivirus program? Another perfectly reasonable discussion we should have. But
would you answer yes or no?
I don't use it. Right? But tech is deeply, deeply international. You can conceive of a US-only iPhone. It'll cost 10 times the price. No one will buy it. So this is a big problem. And discussing 5G and Huawei is just one aspect of a much larger problem. And you're right when you point that out. And this problem is, I will say, it's insurmountably hard right now. And we don't have any good answer. Right? We have no choice but to trust everybody, yet no reason to trust anybody. And that's not a good position to be in.
Bruce Schneier, public interest technologist and a longtime writer on technology and security. Thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you.
Never miss a show. Follow @ChallengingO on Twitter and like Challenging Opinions on Facebook for updates on each show's contents.
Go to the website for sources and links to what we were talking about. And while you're there, please like the show on Facebook, follow @ChallengingO on Twitter, and follow Bruce Schneier @SchenyerBlog. And get in touch with me if you can suggest a guest or topic for a future show. And thanks to everyone who has signed up as patrons on Patreon so far. I really appreciate that. It means I can devote more time to research and to finding interesting guests. And if you could do the same as those people and donate $1 or $2 per podcast or per month, you'll find the link on the website. Also, you'll find out how to subscribe to the podcast for free on your computer, on your phone, or by email. It's all at www.challengingopinions.com. Coming up next Monday, that's June 10th, I'll be talking to the writer Justin Streckel of the National Association for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. The Challenging Opinions podcast is produced and presented by me, William Campbell. Thank you for listening.